Vernon has been described as a city of porches. And indeed, if you want to understand the history of the town, you can do it simply by looking for porches. All I know about porches in Iowa is in a chapter in a book called Take the Next Exit, which is a group of Iowa scholars who put together interesting vignettes about different aspects of Iowa history. It's a nice piece. It's probably for sale in the bookstore. But we're going to talk about porches, and not only does Mount Vernon have porches, but we're one of the few cities that is adding porches. In the last 20 years, it's been interesting to live here and watch this whole movement towards porch restoration that we'll be talking about today. But I wanted to give you a kind of an overview of porches past and present with just some ideas to stimulate your thinking. First of all, we have to remember that the porches. Excuse me. Let me go back here a while. Well, it doesn't make a lot of difference where I start here, I guess. But porches have a function. They are a very functional element on a house. They provide a sense of entry. You have to get in the house, and the porch centers the house, gives it a sense of entry. In the 19th century, when porches were the most popular in this area, everybody knew where the front door was. Today, a lot of homes you have to look around to find the front door, and that's partly thanks to Frank Lloyd Wright and a group of other people who said, well, if you don't know where the front door is, you don't need to know, you don't want to go to the house. But this centers the house. It gives it a sense of entry. And that the sense of entry is historic in terms of porches. The history of porches goes clear back to the Greeks with a sense of portico, but a sense of entry, a sense of centering, almost a ritual. You go to the front door. You know where it is. And if you are standing in front of a front door of a house and you're standing on the porch, you are already inside a covered area of the house. So there's a kind of ritual here of moving into a covered area of the house in order to get into the heart of the house, the living space of the house. So there's a very clear function. My old grandmother used to say, well, the reason we got a porch is so the people will scrape their mud off their feet before they come in my house. And indeed, they are a kind of mud room. By the time you walk across the porch, you've at least shaken some of the mud or water off your clothes, whatever it may be. But it is a kind of covered area that represents a clear sense of something important is going to happen. We are going into the house. It is in some sense a greeting, a way of greeting people. Porch is also decorative. Now, decorative clearly in the sense that it's a very expensive decoration, but it is a decoration. You really know when somebody's removed a porch. If you know anything about porch styles, you know when a porch has been removed. And in restoring porches, one of the things what one needs to be careful about is dimension. Because all these houses essentially had porches of one size or another, and they are important decorative elements. So you have to think about the porch not only functionally in terms of a sense of entry, but a decorative element that must fit in terms of its scale, its design, and its exact location. But there's another dimension of the porch, which is its social function. And the social function of the porch is very important. The porch is that transition zone between the public area and the private area. The sidewalk is public. The porch is that quasi kind of transition zone, and then you go into the intimate character of the home. So it's a very important transition zone between the private interior space of the house and the public space. It is a place for activity. It is a place of play. It is a place for informal social gatherings. and informal interaction. It was a place of courting. And we'll come back to some of these. And it was a place, in many cases, for entertainment. Now, not all porches served all these functions, but most of them did. We're just going to look at some grand porches because later in the day we're going to look at porches in Mount Vernon, so I thought we might look at some porches elsewhere. These are large, of course, Victorian homes on the bluffs overlooking the Mississippi River in Davenport. And so you have these grand verandas, these grand porches, because you have this grand view of the mighty Mississippi. Here you see a porch over on the right-hand side, and you see one over here on the left, but this is not a wraparound porch. There are two porches on two different sides of the house, and they really serve two different purposes that we'll come to. Now, this, of course, is the full veranda, the full treatment. Unfortunately, this piece is perfectly preserved, but here you see the sweep of the porch clear across the house. Now, in your mind's eye, take that porch off. The house is very uninteresting. Apart from the asymmetrical character and the tower, it's essentially bare without that porch. When the porch comes off, you have a kind of naked situation, because these are important decorative elements. They pull down the height of the house by these large verandas, by this very horizontal line keeps the vertical line from being too high. It squats it, it pulls it down. And those are important aspects of design as well as function. Now, this is, in some sense, a modest home, but again, with a modest porch. Again, scale. Ed's going to talk some about styles and other things, but here you see a very vertical house with this very short porch. And again, you take the porch off that house, and it's ugly. It's just brick wall with some clever window hoods. Now we'll pass that one up. Now here's a bad job of restoration. This is the Leopold home on the Mississippi down in Burlington. Aldo Leopold's home, one of the great international conservationists, and a great authority on wood ducks. And this is his property overlooking the Mississippi on the high bluff south of Burlington. Now, this house did not have this style porch on it. And once you begin to think about design and elements here, you begin to see it. Notice you have a curved tower, and then a very sharp angled very sharp angled porch, covering and sweeping around the whole front of the house. Now, one can understand with that view why somebody wanted a full porch. But this house did not have a full porch on it originally, and now by pulling this tower or this house down, it really gets very heavy at the bottom. It feels too anchored. It needs to be a much more delicate structure than that. That porch was put on in the around 1910, 1912, and the house, of course, is much earlier with that style, the brackets. Here's just a small entry house, entry porch, but on a circle drive and a home in the Burlington area. And again, you just have to have a sense of entry. And rather than just a naked door, here you have the door recessed so that you come up onto this little receiving area. It literally is the kind of receiving area to move into the house. But it has no great function as a set place of entertainment or as a place for social interaction. It is primarily there to create a sense of entry and shelter before going into the house. And porches will be put on houses of all textures. This is the stone house, stone and brick, or mostly brick. But again, you have this delicate porch, and it's matched in terms of scale. It's only over the front door. It's clearly just a receiving porch. And then with the brackets and the overhang on the top and the delicate lines at the top are matched by the delicate characteristic of the porch. Gives the whole house a sense of delicacy. It isn't that much brick without a porch or without the dentils across the top would be a very unattractive home. Again, these little entry, just a little entry porch on the right there into the house, but it's very delicate, and it matches in some sense the delicate lines of the shadow board or the barge board that's up in the peaks. That's the most dramatic thing on the house is the barge boards. But again, it's matched by the delicacy of the bay treatment of the bay window and these barge boards with brackets. Now here's a very modest home, and again, the most dramatic thing in the house is not the porch, it's the barge boards, the decorative elements in the roof line. But here the columns are double and very narrow. Now we don't have very many double pillared porches in Mount Vernon. You're hard pressed to find very many of these double pillars, but they're delicate. They keep the house from having a heavy sense. And I think, in my opinion, that there were probably never porch rails on this house. That's debatable, but I've come to the conclusion they probably weren't there. Here is again another style, the Second Empire style, with a very delicate porch in the front. In Davenport, in many of the larger old homes around the Palmer chiropractic area, some gorgeous Second Empire homes, and with virtually no porches. And here, this little porch again centers the house, gives it a sense of entry, and it is clearly has more than just a sense of entry. It could well be, and it's often used as a sitting porch. Porches come in all flavors, so to speak. Here you've got a porch, very delicate porch on the first floor, and then a almost hidden porch above it on the second floor. The porch above the porch phenomenon is very much part of Victorian design in the late 1890s. Full veranda. This is the double house in McGregor, and again, the house is given its real character by this sweeping porch across the front. It is primarily a sitting porch. It's very narrow, so you're only going to have room for a couple chairs, but it's, again, you're overlooking nature. You're overlooking the rest of the world. This is in Strawberry Point, and here you have the sweeping circular veranda around a very angular house with the tower and the trim at the top. And that porch is big enough, and clearly with that style, meant to be an entertaining porch. It's meant to be a play area for kids. It has all of those functions that I mentioned earlier. This is an enclosed porch. Anybody know where this one is? This is at Prairie du Chien. This is a very historic home in Prairie du Chien at the site of the old trading post. And it sets way back from the river, but it's all grass because it's all floodplain between the house and the river. It's a very spectacular view from this porch. But it's a porch on three sides. This is the side facing the river, but it's a really lovely porch. Even with the glass and the panes, you still see the elements of the arch, the little arch trim pieces and pillars through it, and it clearly is an extension of the house. It's the extension of the entertainment area. It just it gives you another whole part of your living room. There's another view of it on the other side where you see the full porch. Well, yeah, here you go. Now this is the servants' quarters for the house you just saw. Here you have these great sweeping verandas on three sides of the house, or two sides of the house, overlooking the river, and here's the little house behind where the servants live. But again, notice the delicacy of these second floor porches. And they are clearly, for the servants, a part of the living area. No air conditioning, you know, you've got a good place to sit, you're up high, you're going to get a breeze. It clearly has a reflection of the lifestyle of people at the time. That's just another view of that house. Now, some of you may know this house. This is in Dubuque. It's now a mortuary. And it's one of the few houses I've found in eastern Iowa that has the elements of a kind of Middle Eastern Islamic style, the onion dome, and the shape of the windows, the almost keystone style windows up on that below the dome. But here again, look at these, this delicate porch that clearly gives the house a sense of entry and helps offset the weight of this onion dome tower. And that's a stone house. So you need something delicate to warm it up and to make it attractive. So you've got porch styles here. This is also Davenport, Dubuque. And again, you have this very interesting use of the double columns, porches. But here you have a full railing and the railing at the top, I can't remember the name of that, but where your porch has a top railing and a bottom railing. And that just adds more and more delicacy. But that's clearly around the house. It's a full porch in the sense of all the functions that I talked about. Well, the porch is, as I say, as a decorative element, is integral to all these styles up through the 1930s. It's an essential element. It goes back, as I say, to the Greeks on one side, but is clearly celebrated in the Victorian period. Now, one of the reasons Mount Vernon has so many of these, many porches, is that its period of growth was in the period of the popularity of the Victorian styles. Between 1880 and 1910, this town grows a great deal. And a lot of these homes in town were rooming houses and boarding houses for Cornell students in that period. But there was also the issue of family size. People had large families. These homes had many bedrooms, and they were really quite large because more than one person had a bedroom. I mean, the kids were usually two or three, or the boys' rooms or the girls' rooms or whatever. And family size had a great deal to do with this. But clearly it's an architectural feature that is, this porch is integral to these architectural styles. And the porch is integral to, as I suggested here, an assumed lifestyle. People spent time in their homes all day long. Okay? Women worked in home, taking care of the house, taking care of the children. They were in the house all day long, into the evening. The home was the place of entertainment. People dropped in. You have the formal calling ritual among the upper middle class who had a lot of the money that went to build these places. People did come by. They'd knock on the door. You had, in a sense, a customary calling hours between 3 and 5. So the women could get home and still cook dinner for their families. You went by and you knocked. You had your calling card. You went in. And had your little visit. Just a whole ritual with that. And you left your calling card and you went home. As well as dinner parties in the evening, which are big dining rooms. And the porch was part of that style. It was a way in which people could be seen in public by sitting on their porch. And that was usually a signal to people that they were available for conversation. So you have these informal conversations across the hedge or from the sidewalk to the porch. And that still goes on in Mount Vernon. Any of you who have porches that sit on them in the summer, in this town, there's so many people walking, particularly in the evenings, that somebody's going to wave at you. Somebody's going to greet you. And, or you say to yourself, oh, there go the Smiths. There's a sense in which you are in a kind of transition zone where the public function and the private function get mixed. But it's not a formal setting. It's a very informal setting in which the person on the porch really has pretty much control of the interaction. If you don't want to see the Schmidts when they walk by your house, you can get up and go in and get a beer and while they go by and come back out. You have control of that interaction. Or, you can walk off the porch and go out into the sidewalk and say, gee, I haven't seen you for a couple of months. How are the kids? Or, isn't it nice that the winter's over and we all have a chance to get back together again? Or, hey, come on up. Come on up on the porch. Have a beer, whatever. There's a certain sense of control of that action in this interesting zone in which the porch resides. But there is a lifestyle associated with porches. It's assumed that people are interested in those things. Now, when people's interest in interaction with others begins to wane, as we begin to look more and more people looking for privacy, going to the cities for anonymity, trying to shield oneself from this ever-expanding population and its constant movement. Once you start to withdraw, then the porch is going to disappear. Now, there are a lot of things that are responsible for the disappearance of the porch. Mass production of homes, the commuter age, where people simply want that garage as close as they can get it to the street. We have the development of the snout house, where the garage is what's important. That's what you see. It's not that porch, it's the garage. We're saying to people, look, I live in my car, so I'm going to take care of my car. The horse is the most important thing in the world. So there it is. You see the barn doors. But that's the kind of movement we've made towards a kind of privacy, and we're looking for a kind of balance. So we have a kind of death and rebirth of the porch that's going on. As we move away from the premium on privacy and the premium on auto travel and living in one's car, there is a certain way in which the porch facilitates, again, of this possibility for interaction between my private life and my public life. My private life, if I'm sitting on the porch, is right available, but my public life is also available as I can greet people or can use the porch for entertaining. The porch is decoration. I think people are a little tired of just straight wall homes that all look alike. So we have the porch as a distinctive element on a house. And I've talked to people who are sort of saying, didn't my house have a porch? And I have to say, probably not. Or, yes, it did, and it was probably quite an elegant porch, given the style of the house. But again, this notion of trying to decorate the house, give it some unique character. Then the porch is returning in part with that movement. It's fun. The number of porches that have been restored in town is really quite amazing. We don't have a count, but I wish we did. And every year there's somebody else is putting one back or restoring one, and that's why you're here. And Jim can tell you how many porches a year he has turned out probably over the last 20 years. But the number of people sitting on the porch versus the number of people who restore porches is interesting. We live in a city, an age of air conditioning. And, if you've got a west-facing porch in the summer, it's not a very pleasant place to be. You got that late afternoon sun bearing right down on that porch. And it's not a very comfortable place to be. But as I say, there's an interesting kind of irony here, because people will live in their houses more with air conditioning, but they'll put porches on the house. And that's, I think, clearly a sense of decoration, a sense of identity. And the porch always, at least for this generation, gives the people who own the porch a sense of rootedness. Hey, I'm in an old house. It's been here a while. I sort of feel like I'm part of the community. I'm kind of anchored here, that kind of rootedness that modern folks have been seeking. Now, I think the other thing that's contributed to the rebirth of the porch is probably this whole restoration and preservation movement, looking to make our communities look stable and look rooted. It's sort of in the air. I mean, here's this whole group of suppliers that have clearly found that people are interested in returning to the porch, and they're manufacturing all this stuff. When I totally restored a porch about 20 years ago, I went looking for spindles, and I had about 10 of the original spindles, and this is the whole front, across the front and down the side porch. I was looking at a couple hundred or more spindles, and they were a rather interesting pattern, and I went through looking through all of the old pattern books from the woodworking mills along the Mississippi, from the Disbro people in Clinton all the way down. Looked at all their catalogs, could not find this particular spindle. And so I was getting a little desperate, and of course then when I really looked at those spindles, they were solid walnut. And I decided, there's no way, Thomas, you can restore a porch and put solid walnut spindles in it, several hundred of them, and then turn around and paint them. I mean, I cannot paint walnut. I just, somehow my soul doesn't let me do that. I'll strip it for hours, but I will not put paint on walnut. Well, anyway, make the long story short, I ended up with my neighbor Rich Rockroar. We made a jig, and we made those. We made them out of pine and painted them, and they're identical to everything that you see. You can't tell the originals, and I know what they are, but you know, from the whole rest of the porch. Now, they aren't perfect because they weren't not the jig of the late 19th century where they could run this stuff just hour by hour. It wasn't about 10 years ago. I was looking through some of this supply catalog, and there are those spindles. Now, I had a guy that said he would make them for me at about $20 a piece. You know, 100. So, you know, they're now available. So, you know, it's just that revolution. People are more interested in this stuff. I mean, you know, who are you? You know, I've never seen anything like that, you know. Those things passed out 50 years ago or whatever. So I think the sense of integrity, though, and the sense of authenticity, the sense of rootedness that we seem to like now, and living in a small town because it's our choice to live here. It's amazing to me how many people choose to live here and do the commute to Cedar Rapids or Iowa City. And it's something about the town, something about its character, and the commission clearly is trying to help preserve that. But the materials are available. Well, as I say, the porch is more than function and design. It's integral to a style, and it really reminds us of a style of life that is becoming a little more attractive to us in the present time with these multifunctional kinds of porches. There are as many people putting porches back as building decks, and that's a whole different world. We had more people building decks 20 years ago than restoring porches. And I just want to add one more thing before Ed goes to work on the care of porches, and that is, yes, they're very expensive. I know that. But I know if they're done right and they're cared for, they do very well. Iowans, I think, have a very strange quirk in their character. We love nature, and we plant all over the place. You know, nobody has just a plain yard. You always got to decorate the yard with these wonderful growing things. And through the years, in my house and many others that I've worked with, people have put plantings right up against the house, trapped all the dampness, blocked off the air that circulates underneath the porch, and you get rot. There's certain things that come with that landscaping features that come with a porch that you have to be careful of. And as I say, it's the instinct is just to go out there and plant. But remember what you're doing to the rest of the porch structure. There are ways to move water and take care of that, but you need to think about that as well. Well, happy porching. Thank you.